Hey guys, tonight we begin with a thought experiment. You think your new smartphone has bugs, or that your new car has a frustrating design flaw? Imagine for a moment living in an era where a brilliant new invention, a marvel of engineering designed to solve a pressing problem, came with a few bugs of its own. Bugs like a high probability of dislocating all your limbs, or setting your house on fire, or perhaps curing your headache by drilling a hole in your skull. Tonight, we are not celebrating the quaint ingenuity of a bygone era. We are prying open the dark, often blood-stained toolbox of the Middle Ages to examine the horrifying flip side of progress. We will explore the dark genius of a time when human creativity, driven by the most extreme pressures of war, faith, and a desperate struggle for survival, produced inventions that could kill with terrifying new efficiency, cure with methods that look to us like pure torture, and maintain justice with machines designed for unimaginable agony. This is the story of medieval inventions, not as quaint curiosities in a museum, but as active, often brutal, agents in a world steeped in violence, disease, and superstition. You will discover how the same ingenuity that built cathedrals also engineered instruments of despair. The reality check for tonight: progress is never a straight line, and it is rarely clean. Behind many of the fascinating inventions of the medieval period lies a history of immense human suffering. The medical hardship was often inflicted by the very tools meant to heal. The gory history was written by the very weapons designed to protect. And the human endurance was tested not just by the problems of the age, but by the often horrifying solutions that were devised. The inventions that killed, cured, and tortured from our title were not accidents. They were products of their time, a time when the line between genius and madness, between healing and hurting, was terrifyingly thin. So, before you get comfortable, before we step into the workshop of the medieval inventor, a space that is part forge, part operating theater, and part torture chamber, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. These explorations into the complex, often unsettling truths behind our shared history. And please, do let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always a profound experience to see who is joining us on these nightly journeys. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft ambient hum, and let's ease into tonight's story together. We are about to uncover the dark genius of the Middle Ages, an era of brilliant innovation and breathtaking cruelty, where every new idea could be a double-edged sword, promising salvation with one side and delivering absolute damnation with the other. We begin our exploration of medieval ingenuity in the place where creativity and cruelty often formed their most intimate and most horrifying alliance: the courtroom and the torture chamber. You must understand that for the medieval mind, justice was not always about finding the truth through evidence. It was often about extracting a confession, purifying a soul through suffering, or making a terrifying public example of a transgressor. And to achieve these goals, a whole new art of agony was born, a field of invention dedicated to the systematic, methodical, and often scientific application of pain. This is our first module, the inventions of justice. Imagine yourself accused of a crime in, say, 14th century Germany or France. Perhaps it's heresy, perhaps treason, perhaps just a theft you did not commit. You are brought before a magistrate or an inquisitor. In the absence of a confession, which is considered the queen of proofs, the court might authorize the use of torture to persuade you to tell the truth. The shocking secret is that the devices they use are not crude clubs or simple whips. They are often complex machines, marvels of engineering designed with an intimate, chilling knowledge of the human body's capacity for pain. The medical hardship here is inflicted with precision. These devices are not meant to kill you outright, at least not at first. They are designed to inflict maximum, escalating pain while keeping you alive and conscious to experience it. One dark modern analogy might be to think of it as a form of reverse engineering of the human nervous system, designed not for healing, but for optimized, controlled destruction. Torturers were, in a grim sense, artisans of agony. The human endurance of those subjected to these inventions is almost impossible to comprehend. You are not just fighting against pain, you are fighting against a machine, a system, an engine of agony designed by a dark genius. The scholarly debate often considers whether these tortures were effective at extracting truth. The overwhelming consensus is no. People under such extreme duress will confess to anything simply to make the pain stop. This led to countless false confessions and wrongful convictions, a gory history of judicial murder fueled by these very inventions. The shocking secret that underpins this entire module is the cold, rational logic that was often applied to this brutality. Torture was seen as a necessary, if unpleasant, part of the judicial process, a tool for uncovering hidden truths. We are about to examine some of the most infamous of these tools, from the rack that pulled bodies apart to machines that crushed them, and devices so specific in their cruelty they almost defy belief. This is the dark side of medieval problem-solving, where the problem was a silent suspect and the invention was a machine that could make anyone scream a confession. Our first specimen in this museum of medieval misery is perhaps the most infamous of all instruments of judicial torture, the rack. Its name alone has become a synonym for extreme agony. The shocking secret of the rack is not just its cruelty, but its chilling efficiency as a piece of mechanical engineering, a machine designed with one single, terrible purpose: to systematically deconstruct the human body by stretching it beyond its absolute limits. Imagine yourself, our accused heretic or traitor, being led into a stark, stone-walled chamber deep within a castle dungeon or an inquisitor's fortress. In the center of the room is a large, horizontal wooden frame, often low to the ground. At each end are heavy wooden rollers connected to levers or a large wheel. This is the rack. Its simple design belies its horrific potential. You are stripped of your outer clothing, and your wrists and ankles are bound securely with ropes to the rollers at opposite ends of the frame. You are now, quite literally, a component in a machine of pain. The process begins. The torturer, a man often hardened by his grim profession, begins to turn the lever. The rollers slowly, powerfully rotate, pulling the ropes taut. At first, a sense of intense, almost unbearable stretching washes over you, but this quickly turns to agony. The medical hardship is catastrophic. Your muscles are pulled taut, screaming in protest. Then, with sickening audible pops and crunches, your major joints begin to dislocate: shoulders, elbows, hips, knees. A feeling as if your own body is being pulled apart. The tearing of ligaments, the grinding of bone against socket consumes your consciousness. A dark, modern analogy might be to imagine a personal training session where the goal is not to build muscle, but to document its every point of failure. The gory history of the rack is filled with accounts of victims being stretched several inches, their bodies permanently mutilated. The human endurance of the victim is pitted against the mechanical advantage of the machine. The pain is not a single blow, but a continuous, escalating torment that can be paused to ask questions and then resumed with even greater intensity if the desired confession is not forthcoming. This gives the interrogator complete control over your agony. One quirky tidbit is that different types of racks existed. Some were more complex, with added features like sharp rollers that would dig into the victim's back as they were stretched. The scholarly debate considers the origins of the device. While associated with the Middle Ages and the Inquisition, similar stretching tortures have been used since antiquity, but it was in medieval and early modern Europe that the rack was perfected as a tool of judicial and political interrogation. The shocking secret is that this was considered a legal procedure in many jurisdictions for obtaining evidence. The confession you scream out while your shoulders are being torn from their sockets is then solemnly recorded and used against you in court. It is a system that manufactures truth through the application of unbearable pain. The rack is the ultimate expression of the dark genius we are exploring, a simple machine based on simple mechanical principles designed to achieve the complex and terrible goal of breaking the human body to conquer the human will. If the rack represents the horror of being pulled apart, our next invention of medieval justice represents the horror of being crushed together. You, our unfortunate prisoner, are now introduced to a device with a strangely poetic and deeply misleading name: the Scavenger's Daughter, also known more accurately as Skeffington's Gyves, after its supposed inventor in the 16th century, Sir Leonard Skeffington, Lieutenant of the Tower of London. The shocking secret of this device is that it was designed as a kind of anti-rack, inflicting pain not by stretching but by compressing the human body into an impossibly small, agonizing space. Imagine this contraption. It is not a large, imposing frame like the rack. It is a deceptively simple-looking A-shaped metal device consisting of hinged iron bars and hoops. You are forced to kneel on the floor, your head forced down towards your knees. The device is then fitted over your body. A large iron hoop goes around your neck and back, another around your midsection, and your ankles are shackled to the base. Then a screw mechanism is tightened, and the A-frame begins to compress. The medical hardship is immediate and horrific. Your body is forced into an extreme, unnatural fetal position. A feeling of immense pressure builds in your spine as it's bent into a painful arch. Your head is forced between your knees. Your thighs are pressed hard against your chest, making breathing difficult, then almost impossible. The iron bars dig into your flesh. It is a slow, suffocating, crushing agony. The gory history includes accounts of this compression being so severe that blood could be forced from the victim's nostrils, ears, and even from their fingertips and toes due to the extreme internal pressure. The human endurance required to withstand this is immense. Unlike the rack's sharp, dislocating pain, the scavenger's daughter inflicts a dull, crushing, suffocating agony that builds relentlessly. You are trapped, unable to move, unable to breathe properly. Your own body turned into an instrument of your torment. It's the horror of extreme claustrophobia combined with excruciating physical compression. One quirky tidbit is its supposed invention within the Tower of London, a place that already housed the rack, suggesting a grim sort of innovation in the field of human suffering, as if one device wasn't enough. The scholarly debate might explore whether this device was used as frequently as the rack. The evidence suggests it was rarer, perhaps a more specialized tool for certain types of prisoners or interrogations. Its shocking secret lies in its cruel ingenuity, its understanding of how to use the body's own structure against itself to create a unique form of torment. If the rack was a personal training session from hell, then the scavenger's daughter, to use another dark modern analogy, is a kind of horrific, ironclad forced yoga, contorting you into a position your body was never meant to hold, all in the name of justice. We now journey back from Tudor England to the ancient world, to an invention so diabolically creative in its cruelty that its story has echoed through history as a byword for gruesome punishment. The brazen bull. While its most famous accounts place it in ancient Greece, its legend terrified the medieval mind, appearing in chronicles and cautionary tales as the ultimate symbol of tyrannical horror. The shocking secret of the brazen bull is its design, which aimed to transform the victim's agonizing death screams into the sound of a bellowing bull, turning human suffering into a monstrous form of art. Imagine the scene as described by ancient writers like Diodorus Siculus. You are in the court of a tyrant, Phalaris of Acragas, a Greek colony in Sicily around the 6th century BCE. A bronze worker from Athens named Paralaus comes to the tyrant and presents his new invention, a life-sized hollow statue of a bull cast entirely in bronze with a door on its side. It is, he explains, a new and improved method of execution. The condemned person is locked inside the bronze bull. A fire is then lit beneath it, heating the metal like an oven. You can almost feel the medical hardship, death by being slowly roasted alive. But the true dark genius of the invention, its quirky and utterly horrifying feature, is in its acoustics. Paralaus had reportedly fitted the bull's head with a complex system of tubes and stops, designed to modulate the victim's screams from within. As the condemned writhed and screamed in agony from the searing heat, their cries would travel through this apparatus and emerge from the bull's nostrils as a sound resembling the powerful, angry bellowing of a live bull. The tyrant and his court could be entertained by this monstrous music, the sound of a man's dying agony transformed into an animalistic roar. The gory history of the brazen bull takes an even more ironic turn. According to the legend, the tyrant Phalaris was pleased with the invention's concept but disgusted by its creator's cruelty. To test the device, he ordered its inventor, Parallaeus, to be locked inside. Parallaeus's screams were the first music the bull ever produced. Phalaris then reportedly had the half-dead Parallaeus removed and thrown from a cliff, ensuring the inventor was the first, but not the last, victim of his own creation. Phalaris himself, the story goes, was eventually overthrown and met his own end inside the same bronze bull. The scholarly debate questions the historical accuracy of the brazen bull. Did it truly exist as described, or was it a later fabrication, a piece of political propaganda designed to blacken the name of the tyrant Phalaris? While no definitive archaeological evidence of the bull has ever been found, the story was widely believed in the ancient and medieval worlds. It appeared in Roman texts and was known to early Christian writers, who used it as an example of pagan depravity and a symbol of martyrdom. Some Christian saints were said to have been executed in this manner. Whether historical fact or powerful legend, the shocking secret of the brazen bull is its place in the human imagination as a perfect fusion of artistry and atrocity. It represents the ultimate perversion of ingenuity, where technical skill is used not to improve life, but to orchestrate and aestheticize suffering. For you, the listener, picturing this bronze nightmare, its belly glowing red with heat, the air filled with the smell of burning flesh and the sound of engineered screams, is to confront one of the darkest inventions ever conceived by the human mind. It is a machine that turned a dying man's last breath into a tyrant's terrifying entertainment. Our final exhibit in this first module on the inventions of medieval justice is a device so specific in its cruelty, so personal in its application, that it reveals a particularly shocking secret about the anxieties and obsessions of the past. It is known by many names: the choke pear, the Pope's pear, or most evocatively, the pear of anguish. This was not a tool for grand state executions, but a smaller, more intimate instrument of torture and public humiliation, designed to punish specific, often social or verbal transgressions. Imagine this object. It is a metal device, usually iron or brass, shaped like a pear. It consists of several spoon-like segments or leaves that are hinged at the top. At the other end, there is a key or a screw mechanism. The pear, in its closed state, could be inserted into one of the body's orifices, the mouth for instance. The torturer would then turn the key. As the screw turned, the segments of the pear would slowly, powerfully spread apart, expanding to their maximum width inside the cavity. The medical hardship is immediate and devastating. If inserted into the mouth, it would stretch the victim's jaw to its breaking point, potentially shattering teeth and bone. It would make speech impossible. A brutally effective gag. The gory history becomes even darker when you consider its other alleged uses, as described in some, often sensationalized historical texts and museum collections. It was reportedly used to punish women accused of scolding or adultery, or individuals accused of blasphemy or heresy, with the device being inserted into other bodily orifices, causing unimaginable internal tearing and mutilation. The human endurance required to survive such an intimate, violating, and agonizing ordeal is unthinkable. One quirky, or rather, deeply revealing detail is the device's very design. It is shaped like a fruit, yet its function is one of pure mechanical violence. This contrast between its almost elegant form and its horrific purpose is deeply unsettling. The scholarly debate surrounding the pear of anguish is intense. Many modern historians are highly skeptical, arguing that there is very little reliable contemporary medieval documentation of its actual use. Most existing examples are from the 19th century or later, and many may be elaborate fakes or fantasies created for macabre collections. The idea of the pear, they argue, might be more a product of later centuries' lurid fascination with medieval cruelty than a widespread historical reality. However, whether it was a common tool or a rare and terrible exception, or even just a powerful, persistent myth, its story tells us a shocking secret about the medieval preoccupation with controlling certain types of social behavior. It was a device aimed at punishing the sins of the flesh and the sins of the tongue. It was an invention designed to silence blasphemers, punish scolding women, and enforce social and religious conformity through targeted, intimate, and deeply humiliating physical torment. It represents a specific form of dark genius, an engineering of pain designed not just to break the body, but to punish the very acts of speaking, of desiring, of defying social norms. The pair of anguish, real or imagined, remains a potent symbol of a world that sought to control its subjects, not just through the gallows and the pyre, but through the brutal invasion of their most private selves. We have just emerged from the dark, claustrophobic world of the medieval torture chamber, where human ingenuity was perversely applied to the deconstruction of the individual body. Now we step out onto a much larger, though no less terrifying stage, the medieval battlefield. Here, the dark genius of the age was not focused on breaking one person, but on annihilating thousands. The shocking secret of medieval warfare is that it was a relentless engine of innovation, a brutal arms race where survival demanded ever more efficient, more terrifying, and more creative ways to kill. Welcome to our second module, the Symphony of Destruction and the inventions that composed its deadly music. Imagine yourself not as a single prisoner, but as a soldier in a medieval army, or perhaps a terrified civilian cowering behind a castle wall. The threats you face are not just swords and spears, the familiar tools of ancient combat. You are now facing new, terrifying technologies designed to crush fortifications, pierce the strongest armor, and set the very sea ablaze. A sense of human endurance is now required to stand on a battlefield facing these new engines of death, a test of nerve against the cold, impersonal mathematics of destruction. The medical hardship that resulted from these inventions was catastrophic. The wounds they inflicted were often more grievous, more difficult to treat than a simple sword cut. A crossbow bolt could punch through mail and leather, causing massive internal damage. The crushing force of a stone from a trebuchet could obliterate a man entirely, and the burns from incendiary weapons like Greek fire were often untreatable, leading to a slow, agonizing death. In this module, we will explore the genius and the horror of these military inventions. We will look at the trebuchet not just as a marvel of physics, but as the world's first long-range biological weapon. We will examine the crossbow, a weapon so deadly and unfair in its ability to kill a noble knight from a distance that the church actually tried to ban it. We will uncover the secrets of Greek fire, the mysterious, unquenchable hell flame of the Byzantines. And we will see how even the simplest of inventions, like the humble caltrop, could bring the most powerful cavalry charge to a screaming, bloody, and chaotic halt. One quirky, or rather grimly predictable detail is that for every new offensive invention, a new defensive one would arise, a constant bloody cycle of innovation. Thicker castle walls were built to withstand trebuchets, stronger armor was developed to resist crossbow bolts. The scholarly debate often considers how this technological arms race shaped not just the nature of warfare, but the very structure of medieval society, leading to the rise of professional armies and the decline of the feudal knight. The shocking secret is that progress on the battlefield almost invariably meant progress in the art of killing. So ready yourself as we now explore the terrifying symphony of medieval warfare, an orchestra whose primary instruments were wood, steel, stone, and fire. Of all the great engines of medieval siege warfare, none is more iconic, more powerful, or more terrifying than the trebuchet. This is not the simple, spring-powered catapult you might imagine from old movies. The counterweight trebuchet, perfected in the medieval period, was a colossal machine, a masterpiece of physics and engineering capable of hurling immense projectiles over incredible distances with devastating accuracy. The shocking secret of this invention, however, is not just its power to shatter stone walls, but its gruesome versatility as a weapon of biological and psychological warfare. Imagine yourself defending a besieged castle. For weeks you have withstood the enemy's assaults, but then they assemble it. A giant wooden throwing arm, sometimes over 50 feet long, pivoted on a massive frame with an enormous counterweight, weighing many tons at the other end. You watch as a team of engineers and soldiers slowly winches the throwing arm down, loading a massive, crudely shaped stone into the sling. With a signal, the counterweight is released. It plummets to the ground, and the throwing arm whips upwards with astonishing speed, launching the stone in a high arc towards your walls. A deep sense of dread washes over you as you hear the whistling shriek of the projectile, followed by a cataclysmic crash as it smashes into your battlements, sending stone splinters flying like shrapnel. This is the gory history of siege warfare at its most raw. The psychological effect of knowing that at any moment a projectile weighing hundreds of pounds could crash through your roof or smash into your section of the wall is immense. But the physical, medical hardship is even more direct. A direct hit was, of course, instantly fatal, capable of crushing a man in full armor. But the dark genius of the trebuchet lay in its ammunition. Why limit yourself to stones? Medieval commanders with a chilling pragmatism quickly realized they could fling almost anything over the walls to terrorize and weaken the defenders. The most infamous of these alternative projectiles was the diseased animal carcass. Imagine a dead, rotting cow, its body swollen with disease, being loaded into the trebuchet's sling. It is launched, tumbling through the air, and lands with a sickening thud in the middle of your castle courtyard. Its putrefying flesh and the cloud of flies, it brings a potent vector for disease. This, to use a dark modern analogy, was the world's first long-range bioweapon delivery system. The quirky and grotesque list of projectiles didn't end there. Chroniclers record severed heads of captured enemies being flung into castles as a form of psychological terror. Baskets of beehives, which would shatter on impact, unleashing swarms of angry bees on the defenders. Even human excrement and other filth were used in an attempt to spread disease and lower morale. The scholarly debate considers how effective this biological warfare actually was, but its psychological impact is undeniable. The human endurance of those living inside a besieged city, dealing not only with starvation and bombardment, but also with the constant threat of pestilence being literally catapulted over their walls, is truly staggering. The trebuchet was a weapon of total war, blurring the line between combatants and non-combatants, a testament to the medieval mind's capacity for both brilliant engineering and utter ruthlessness. For centuries, the medieval battlefield was dominated by a single figure, the mounted, heavily armored knight. He was the tank of his day, a symbol of aristocratic power and martial prowess, seemingly invincible to the weapons of common foot soldiers. But then came an invention so brutally effective, so democratizing in its lethality, that it threatened to upend this entire social and military order: the crossbow. The shocking secret of the crossbow is not just its power, but the moral and social panic it induced in the ruling warrior class. Imagine yourself as a fully armored knight charging across the field, your lance couched, ready to shatter upon an enemy shield. You're the product of a lifetime of training, your equipment worth a small fortune. But from 200 yards away, a peasant, a man you would not even deign to speak to, raises a strange, bow-like device mounted on a stock. He takes aim. There is a sharp thwack, and a short, heavy projectile called a bolt, or quarrel, smashes through your expensive shield, your chainmail, and punches deep into your chest. You topple from your horse, your life ended by an unchivalrous weapon wielded by a man of no social standing. A feeling of profound injustice, of cosmic unfairness, might be your last thought. The medical hardship caused by crossbow bolts was particularly gruesome. Unlike an arrow, which often cut its way in, the heavy armor-piercing bolt caused massive trauma, shattering bone and creating deep, difficult-to-treat wounds. Extracting a barbed crossbow bolt was a horrific surgical ordeal in itself, often leading to greater injury, infection, and death. The gory history of medieval battlefields from the 12th century onwards is littered with the victims of this brutally efficient weapon. The power of the crossbow was so terrifying to the establishment that, in a quirky tidbit of history, the church actually tried to ban it. The Second Lateran Council in 1139 issued a canon forbidding the use of crossbows and bows against fellow Christians, calling it a weapon, hateful to God, and unfit for Christians. Of course, this ban was almost universally ignored. The weapon was simply too effective to give up, especially when fighting an enemy who had no such scruples. You can almost hear the cynical joke of a medieval general. Yes, it's a terrible, ungodly weapon, which is why we must have more of them than the other side. The scholarly debate often considers the crossbow's role in the decline of the knight. While plate armor was developed to counter its effectiveness, the crossbow, especially later, more powerful steel versions, remained a potent threat. It empowered infantry, changed battlefield tactics, and forced the aristocracy to acknowledge that their dominance was no longer guaranteed by armor alone. The human endurance was now that of the knight, no longer just enduring the weight of his armor, but the constant, unnerving threat of a sudden, anonymous death from a distance. The shocking secret of the crossbow is that it was seen as a moral, as much as a military threat. It was a coward's weapon in the eyes of the chivalric class because it required less strength and training than the longbow, and it allowed a commoner to kill a nobleman with relative ease. It was, in its own way, a technological revolution that challenged the social order. We now turn our attention from the battlefields of Western Europe to the glittering, treacherous waters of the Bosphorus and the naval conflicts of the Byzantine Empire. Here, for centuries, the Byzantines possessed a terrifying and unique invention, a shocking secret weapon that struck fear into the hearts of their enemies and saved their capital, Constantinople, on more than one occasion: Greek fire. This was not just an incendiary weapon, it was a legendary, unquenchable hell flame, a substance that reportedly burned on water and clung to its victims, a true product of dark genius. Imagine you are a sailor on an Arab or Russ's ship, part of a fleet attempting to assault the mighty sea walls of Constantinople in, say, the 7th or 10th century. Your ships draw near. From the Byzantine dromons, warships, a strange siphon-like bronze tube is aimed at your vessel. There is a roaring sound, and a stream of liquid fire erupts from the tube, soaring through the air and splashing across your deck and sails. But this is no ordinary fire. The gory history of Greek fire is its horrifying properties. It clings to wood, to cloth, to flesh. And most terrifyingly, water did not extinguish it. In fact, some sources say it only made it burn more fiercely. A sense of absolute panic washes over you. Your ship is ablaze with a fire you cannot put out. Men, their bodies covered in the sticky burning liquid, leap into the sea seeking relief, only to find the flames continuing to burn on the water's surface around them. The medical hardship is absolute, agonizing, deep burns that were almost certainly fatal, as medieval medicine had no effective treatment for such trauma. The psychological terror this weapon induced was perhaps its greatest strength. It seemed like a supernatural force, a true hell flame wielded by the divinely protected emperors of Constantinople. The shocking secret of Greek fire is that even today, its precise formula remains a mystery, a source of intense scholarly debate. It was one of the most closely guarded state secrets of the Byzantine Empire. Ancient and medieval texts describe its ingredients cryptically, mentioning substances like naphtha, a form of petroleum, quicklime, sulfur, and various resins and oils. The quirky tidbit is that the complex formula was likely passed down through a single family or guild of engineers in Constantinople, ensuring its secrecy for centuries. Modern attempts to replicate it suggest a petroleum-based mixture, pressurized and projected through a siphon, but the exact composition that gave it its legendary properties is lost to history. The human endurance was that of the Byzantine Empire itself, which, thanks in large part to this technological advantage, survived numerous naval sieges that would have otherwise destroyed it. During the Arab sieges of Constantinople in 674-678 and 717-718, Greek fire was instrumental in annihilating the enemy fleets and saving Christian Europe from a potentially devastating early Islamic conquest. This invention represents the pinnacle of medieval chemical warfare. For you, the enemy sailor facing it, it was a confrontation with something that seemed to defy the laws of nature. As you watch your ship and your comrades being consumed by a fire that burns on water, you are not just facing a superior weapon. You are facing the terrifying secret power of an ancient empire. Not all of the most effective and shocking secret inventions of medieval warfare were massive, complex machines like the trebuchet or mysterious chemical concoctions like Greek fire. Sometimes, the most devastating innovations were brutally, ingeniously simple. You are now introduced to one such device, the caltrop. A small, unassuming object, yet one capable of bringing the most powerful force on the medieval battlefield, the charge of heavily armored knights, to a screaming, bloody, and chaotic halt. For the knight, the caltrop was a simple, low-tech nightmare. Imagine the device. It is a small piece of iron, forged with 4 sharp spikes arranged in such a way that no matter how it is thrown on the ground, one spike always points directly upwards. The quirky genius of its design is its simplicity and its unfailing effectiveness. Now, imagine yourself a medieval commander facing an impending charge from a force of superior enemy cavalry. You don't have enough archers. Your spearmen are nervous. You send out men under the cover of darkness to scatter thousands of these small, sharp iron jacks across the ground where the enemy knights are expected to charge. The gory history unfolds when the charge begins. You see them coming, a thunderous wave of armored men on powerful war horses, a seemingly unstoppable force. But as they hit the ground seated with caltrops, the scene descends into chaos. You feel a jolt of grim satisfaction. The horses, their hooves unprotected, step on the sharp, upward-pointing spikes. The iron points pierce deep into the soft, sensitive frog of the hoof, causing excruciating pain. Horses scream, rear up, stumble, and fall, their legs broken or lamed. Knights, encased in hundreds of pounds of armor, are thrown violently to the ground, often stunned, injured, or trapped beneath their own fallen, flailing mounts. The medical hardship is severe, both for beast and man. A horse lamed by a caltrop is useless and often has to be put down. A knight thrown from his horse is incredibly vulnerable. If his armor is breached in the fall, or if he is simply unable to get back to his feet quickly due to its weight, he is easy prey for the waiting infantry, who can dispatch him with daggers or hammers. The human endurance of the charging knights is shattered not by a complex strategy, but by a simple, vicious piece of iron. The scholarly debate often highlights the use of caltrops as a key element in famous battles where infantry triumphed over cavalry, such as the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, where the Scots under Robert the Bruce reportedly used them to great effect against the English knights. It was a weapon of the underdog, a cheap, easily produced tool that could neutralize a far more expensive and powerful military asset. This makes it a dark, modern analogy of sorts for something like the improvised explosive device, IED, of modern warfare, a low-tech, asymmetric weapon designed to disrupt and neutralize a superior force. The shocking secret of the caltrop is its profound, almost elegant brutality. It is a testament to the dark genius of medieval inventors who understood that sometimes the most effective way to defeat a powerful enemy is not to match their strength, but to attack their weakest point, in this case, the unprotected hooves of their mighty war horses. For you, the knight charging confidently into battle, the unseen, humble caltrop lying in the grass is a more terrifying threat than the row of spears awaiting you. A simple, sharp spike that can bring your glory, your power, and your life to an abrupt and agonizing end. You have witnessed the dark genius of the Middle Ages applied to justice and warfare, where inventions were designed for the express purpose of inflicting pain and death. But now, we enter a realm that is, in some ways, even more terrifying, the world of medieval medicine. Here, the shocking secret is that the most horrific suffering was often inflicted not out of malice, but out of a desperate and profoundly misguided desire to heal. Welcome to our third module, the healer's horror and the inventions of a medicine that often made the cure far more terrifying than the disease. Imagine yourself falling ill in the medieval period. You have a raging fever, a splitting headache, a wound that refuses to heal. You summon the local physician or barber surgeon. He arrives, not with a sterile kit of scientifically tested instruments, but with a leather bag of tools that look suspiciously like they belong in a carpenter's workshop or a torture chamber. His understanding of your body is based not on microbiology or anatomy as we know it, but on the ancient, flawed theory of the four humors, the belief that your health depends on the balance of blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. A feeling of profound unease might settle upon you as you realize the medical hardship you are about to endure will be based on this fundamentally incorrect science. The inventions we will explore in this module are not designed to kill, but to cure. Yet, in their application, they often cross the line into what we would consider brutal, medically sanctioned torture. We will look at the tools of bloodletting, the ubiquitous practice of draining your excess blood to restore humoral balance. We will examine the trepanning drill, an instrument for boring holes into your skull to release evil spirits, or pressure believed to cause madness and headaches. And we will deconstruct the iconic mask of the plague doctor, a terrifying invention born from a completely wrong theory about how disease spread. The human endurance required to submit to these treatments was immense. You had to place your trust in a practitioner whose methods were based on centuries of accumulated error. You had to endure procedures without anesthesia, without antiseptics, and with a very real risk of making your condition catastrophically worse. One quirky, or rather deeply unsettling, detail is that the line between a physician, a surgeon, a barber, and an executioner was often incredibly blurry. The same man who cut your hair might also pull your teeth, perform bloodletting, and on another day might be tasked with carrying out a judicial mutilation. It's a dark modern analogy, but it's like discovering your family doctor also moonlights as a state-sanctioned torturer. The scholarly debate often considers whether medieval medicine was entirely useless. While many of its core theories were wrong, practitioners did possess a vast knowledge of herbal remedies, some of which were genuinely effective, and considerable practical experience with treating wounds, albeit with a high rate of failure due to infection. However, the shocking secret is the degree to which dogmatic adherence to flawed theories like humorism led to the invention and widespread use of tools and procedures that were actively, demonstrably harmful. Prepare yourself as we now enter the medieval infirmary, a place where the road to hell was truly paved with good, if terrifyingly misguided intentions. Of all the misguided medical practices that dominated the medieval world for over 1,000 years, none was more ubiquitous, more dogmatically applied, or more insidiously harmful than bloodletting. The shocking secret is that this was not a fringe treatment for obscure ailments. It was the go-to frontline cure for almost everything, from fevers and infections to headaches and melancholy. And the inventions designed to facilitate this practice, the phlegm, the lancet, the bleeding bowl, were the most common tools in any medieval physician's or barber surgeon's bag. Imagine yourself sick with a fever. Your body is already weak, dehydrated. The physician arrives, examines you, and gravely declares that your illness is caused by an excess of hot and moist blood, a dangerous imbalance in your humors. The prescription is immediate and unwavering. You must be bled. He opens his bag and produces his instruments. The lancet is a small, pointed, double-edged blade designed for cleanly piercing a vein. The phlegm is a more intimidating tool, often with multiple blades of different sizes that could be placed over a vein and struck with a small mallet or blood stick to make the incision. The medical hardship is not just the pain of the cut, but the terrifying sight of your own life-giving blood being deliberately drained from your body at a time when you are already weak and ill. You see the barber surgeon prepare. He ties a tourniquet around your arm to make the veins bulge. He selects his tool, a sharp sting as the lancet pierces your skin, or a sickening thwack as he taps the phlegm, and the blood begins to flow, dark and rich, into a special bleeding bowl, often made of pewter or brass and marked with graduated lines so the practitioner could measure precisely how much blood he was taking. The gory history is that significant quantities could be drained, several ounces or even a pint or more depending on the severity of your perceived imbalance. This was considered high-tech medicine. A quirky tidbit is that the red and white striped pole you still see outside modern barbershops is a direct legacy of this practice. The red represents blood, and the white represents the bandages used. The barber was the surgeon, and bloodletting was one of his primary services, right alongside a shave and a haircut. The human endurance was in surviving not just your original illness but also the prescribed cure, which often left you significantly weaker, anemic, and more susceptible to further infection. The scholarly debate on bloodletting is now, of course, settled. For the vast majority of conditions it was used for, it was not only useless but actively harmful. It weakened the body's natural defenses and could lead to shock or even death if too much blood was taken. Yet, its use was so deeply ingrained in medical theory, inherited from the ancient Greek physician Galen, that it went virtually unchallenged for centuries. To question bloodletting was to question the very foundation of established medical science. The shocking secret of these simple inventions, the phlegm and the lancet, is the immense systemic harm they caused over centuries. They were not tools of malice, but of profound, dogmatic ignorance. They represent a dark genius of a different kind, the invention of a medical procedure so universally applied and so fundamentally wrong that it likely killed more people than it ever helped. For you, our medieval patient, the sight of the surgeon approaching with his gleaming lancet is not a promise of healing, but the beginning of a terrifying ordeal that will leave you weaker, sicker, and praying you survive the cure. A sense of immense pressure builds behind your eyes. You have a splitting headache that will not cease, or perhaps you are suffering from fits of epilepsy, or bouts of what your community calls madness. The physicians have tried bloodletting to no avail, and so they turn to a far more direct, more invasive, and more terrifying invention of medieval medicine: the trepanning drill. The shocking secret of trepanning, or trepanation, is that it is one of the oldest surgical procedures known to humanity, practiced since the Stone Age, and it involves the deliberate boring of a hole into your skull while you are alive. Imagine the scene. You are held down, likely by several strong assistants, as the barber surgeon approaches. There is no anesthesia, save perhaps for a large quantity of alcohol or a crude opiate to dull your senses, but certainly not to eliminate the pain. The surgeon's tools are terrifyingly simple: a pointed drill, perhaps a cylindrical saw, and scrapers for smoothing the bone. He shaves a patch of your scalp, makes an incision, and begins the slow, agonizing process of drilling or sawing through your skull bone. The medical hardship is beyond words. A horrifying grinding sound that vibrates through your entire skull, the intense localized pain, and the terror of knowing that a slip of the hand could mean instant death. What was the logic behind this brutal procedure? For medieval practitioners, it was twofold. First, in cases of head injury, they understood, correctly in a rudimentary way, that swelling or bleeding within the skull could be fatal, and drilling a hole could relieve this pressure. Some patients with skull fractures actually survived this procedure, a testament to the surgeon's skill and a great deal of luck. But the second and far more common reason was rooted in superstition and a misunderstanding of mental illness. They believed that epilepsy, migraines, or madness were caused by evil spirits or bad humors trapped inside the skull. By boring a hole, they were creating an exit route for these malevolent forces. You weren't just undergoing surgery, you were the subject of a medical exorcism. The gory history of trepanning is written on the skulls of its victims, which have been found in archaeological sites across Europe. Archaeologists can even tell if a patient survived by looking for signs of bone regrowth around the edges of the hole. One quirky, or rather astonishing detail is that a surprising number of patients did survive the initial procedure, though what their quality of life was like afterwards, with a permanent hole in their head often covered only by skin, is another question entirely. The scholarly debate considers whether this was a widespread practice or reserved for the most extreme cases. The evidence suggests it was performed with some regularity, though it was always a high-risk last resort procedure. Your human endurance in this scenario would be tested to its absolute limit, willingly submitting to this, or surviving it if it was forced upon you, a testament to the sheer desperation of those suffering from debilitating neurological conditions in a pre-scientific age. The shocking secret of the trepanning drill is that it represents a terrifying intersection of genuine surgical observation, profound medical ignorance, and deep-seated superstition. It is a tool that, in some rare cases of head trauma, might have accidentally saved a life, but in many others was used to release demons from the skulls of the mentally ill, often with fatal or debilitating consequences from infection or brain damage. For you, the patient, the sound of that drill against your skull is the sound of medieval science at its most brutal and most desperate. We now arrive at perhaps the most iconic and most terrifying invention of medieval and Renaissance medicine: the beaked mask of the plague doctor. You see this image everywhere, a symbol of the Black Death, a figure of grim, bird-like horror. But the shocking secret behind this famous mask is not just its frightening appearance, but the profoundly flawed, yet scientifically reasoned for its time, theory of disease it represents. It is a monument to a medical paradigm that was completely, utterly wrong. Imagine your village or town in the grip of the plague. The church bells toll endlessly for the dead. Carts piled high with bodies rumble through the streets. And then, you see him approaching. The plague doctor. A sense of both hope and terror washes over you. He is covered from head to toe in a protective garment, often made of waxed leather or canvas. He wears gloves, a wide-brimmed hat, and carries a long stick to examine patients without touching them. And most strikingly, he wears the mask. A long, beak-like appendage extending half a foot or more from his face, with glass eyepieces. He looks less like a healer and more like a bizarre, man-sized bird, a creature from a nightmare. The quirky tidbit is that the beak wasn't just for show. It had a specific medical purpose based on the prevailing miasma theory of disease. Before the discovery of germs, doctors believed that diseases like the plague were spread by miasma, or bad air, a foul-smelling vapor or pestilence that rose from rotting organic matter. The long beak of the mask was designed to be stuffed with aromatic herbs, spices, and other sweet-smelling substances, like lavender, mint, camphor, or vinegar-soaked sponges. The idea was that these powerful, pleasant smells would filter out or overpower the deadly miasma, protecting the doctor from infection. It was, in effect, a primitive gas mask based on a completely incorrect understanding of how disease was transmitted. The medical hardship here is that of the doctor himself, willingly walking into plague-infested houses, surrounded by death, placing his faith in this bizarre and ultimately useless contraption. And for you, the patient, the arrival of this terrifying bird-like figure at your bedside was likely a sign that your own death was imminent. The human endurance was in facing the plague with such pathetically inadequate tools. The scholarly debate often centers on the true prevalence and effectiveness of this specific uniform. While it is famously associated with the Black Death of the 14th century, the most well-known design with the beak is actually attributed to a 17th century French physician, Charles Delorme, for use during later plague outbreaks. However, similar protective gear and theories about bad air certainly existed in the medieval period. The shocking secret of the plague doctor's mask is that it is a perfect symbol of medieval medicine. It is visually striking, based on an elaborate and internally consistent, though entirely wrong theory, and utterly ineffective against the true nature of the disease. It is a monument to a time when humanity, faced with a microscopic, invisible killer, fought back with the only weapons it had: fear, superstition, and a beak full of sweet-smelling herbs. For you, the medieval plague victim, the sight of this strange bird-like healer is the last terrifying face you might see, a dark angel whose cure is as illusory as his protection. You have survived our descent into the dark worlds of medieval justice, warfare, and medicine, where the dark genius of invention was often applied with terrifying intent or consequence. But now we turn to our final module, exploring a shocking secret that is perhaps more insidious, the hidden dangers and unintended horrors lurking within the seemingly benign inventions of medieval daily life. A sense of unease might creep in as you realize that even progress had a price, and sometimes that price was paid in fire, fear, and social upheaval. Imagine the simple, everyday objects and structures that define your world. They are the products of centuries of slow, incremental innovation. But each new step forward, in an era of limited scientific understanding and often volatile social conditions, could bring with it new and unforeseen perils. The human endurance was not just in surviving the major catastrophes like plague and war, but in navigating the smaller, daily risks posed by the very technologies meant to improve your life. In the sections to come, we will explore some of these double-edged swords of medieval domestic progress. We will see how the invention of the chimney, a revolutionary development that allowed for warmer, less smoky homes, also became a deadly fire trap, capable of turning a cozy cottage into a funeral pyre in minutes. We will examine the advent of eyeglasses, a miracle for aging scholars and craftsmen, and how this newfound ability to see the unseen was sometimes viewed with suspicion as a form of unnatural or even diabolical power. And finally, we will look at the most transformative invention of the late medieval period, the printing press. This machine, which promised to unleash knowledge and democratize learning, also fueled religious wars by spreading heretical ideas with unprecedented speed. The medical hardship here is societal, the sickness of schism and religious conflict, exacerbated by this new technology. One quirky tidbit is that the first printed books were often designed to look exactly like handwritten manuscripts, as people were initially suspicious of this new, impersonal form of production. The scholarly debate on the impact of these daily life technologies is rich. How quickly did they spread? Who had access to them? How did they truly alter the lives and mindsets of ordinary people? The gory history is in the house fires, the persecution of those deemed to have unnatural knowledge, and the bloody religious conflicts fueled by printed pamphlets. The shocking secret is that progress is never simple. Every new invention, every step forward, creates new challenges, new fears, and new forms of danger. Let us now explore the hidden perils lurking within the very fabric of medieval daily life. You are a medieval peasant or town dweller, and for most of your life, home has meant a single large room, its air perpetually thick with choking, eye-watering smoke from an open central hearth. The walls and rafters are blackened with soot. A feeling of constant respiratory irritation is a normal part of your existence, a medical hardship so common it's barely remarked upon. But then, a revolutionary invention begins to appear in the homes of the wealthier classes, and eventually, even in more modest dwellings. The chimney. The shocking secret of this seemingly miraculous innovation is that while it promised a cleaner, warmer home, it often brought with it a new and terrifyingly swift form of destruction, the house fire. Imagine the difference the chimney makes. For the first time, smoke from your hearth fire can be efficiently channeled up and out of your living space. The air inside your home becomes clearer, more breathable. You can have a larger, more efficient fireplace built against a wall, providing better heat and a more focused cooking area. It's a profound improvement in your quality of life, a leap forward in domestic comfort. You can finally see the person you're talking to across the room without your eyes watering. But this new comfort comes with a hidden, deadly flaw. Early medieval chimneys were often constructed from less than ideal materials, wattle and daub, a lattice of wood covered in clay and straw, timber or poorly mortared stone. As you use your fire day after day, a thick, black, flammable substance called creosote begins to build up on the inside of this chimney flue. You, a medieval homeowner, have no concept of chimney sweeps as a professional service and no real understanding of the chemical properties of soot buildup. Your human endurance is now coupled with a blissful ignorance of the ticking time bomb being constructed right above your head. One cold winter night, you build up a large, roaring fire to keep your family warm. A stray spark, or simply the intense heat from the fire below, ignites the thick layer of creosote lining your chimney. The result is a chimney fire. A roaring, intense inferno erupts within the very walls of your house. The gory history of medieval towns is filled with devastating fires, and this new invention, designed for safety and comfort, ironically becomes a major contributor. The quirky tidbit is that the very structure meant to contain the fire is now the source of its uncontrollable spread. The fire can quickly burn through the wattle and daub or timber structure of the chimney itself, and from there, spread to the thatched roof or the wooden beams of your house. In the tightly packed, timber-framed houses of a medieval town, a single house fire could become a raging inferno, consuming entire streets, even whole districts, in a matter of hours. There are no professional fire brigades, no high-pressure hoses. There is only a desperate bucket chain from the nearest well or river, and the frantic efforts of your neighbors to save their own homes. The scholarly debate might consider how much this risk offset the benefits of the chimney, but for those whose homes were destroyed, the debate is moot. The shocking secret of the chimney is its duality as a symbol of progress and peril. For you, the peasant who has finally gotten a chimney, the warmth it provides is a blessing, but the fear of that sudden, roaring fire trap, the potential for your cozy home to become your funeral pyre, is a new and terrifying nightmare. A sense of frustration builds as the years advance. You are a medieval scholar, a monk hunched over a manuscript, or a skilled artisan whose livelihood depends on intricate detail, and the words or threads before you have begun to blur. In earlier centuries, this medical hardship would have been a career-ending, life-altering sentence, forcing you into premature retirement or dependence. But now, in the late 13th or early 14th century, a remarkable new invention has appeared, primarily in Italy: eyeglasses. The shocking secret is that this simple, miraculous device, capable of restoring clear vision, was sometimes viewed not as a gift from God, but with a deep, unsettling suspicion as a form of unnatural or even diabolical power. Imagine putting on a pair of these early spectacles for the first time. They are likely crude by our standards, two convex lenses probably made of quartz or beryl, set in a frame of bone, metal, or leather and perched on the nose or held up to the eyes. But for you, whose world had become a frustrating blur, the effect is instantaneous, almost magical. The blurry script of your manuscript snaps into sharp focus. The fine threads of your weaving become distinct again. It is a moment of profound revelation, a restoration of your abilities, your independence, your craft. For the educated elite, scholars, clergy, merchants, skilled artisans, eyeglasses were a revolution. They extended the working lives of experienced individuals by decades, allowing them to continue reading, writing, and performing detailed work long after their natural eyesight began to fail. You can see the quirky tidbit in early Renaissance paintings where saints or learned figures are often depicted wearing spectacles as a symbol of their wisdom, piety, and intellectual gravitas. They become a status symbol, a sign that you are a person of learning and importance. But outside these educated circles, in the world of the largely illiterate, superstitious peasantry, such a device could be viewed very differently. Imagine a peasant seeing his lord, or the local priest, suddenly able to read a small text that was illegible to him just the day before. How do you explain this sudden restoration of sight? In a world where the supernatural was an everyday reality, magic or divine intervention were the most obvious answers. The human endurance of those with failing sight was a known, accepted part of aging. To suddenly cure it with 2 pieces of polished glass could seem like cheating nature, or worse. To use a dark modern analogy, it was like seeing someone suddenly gain a superpower overnight, an ability that was not natural. The scholarly debate explores the social perception of early eyeglasses. While there is little direct evidence of wearers being formally prosecuted for witchcraft simply for using them, the association with alchemy, astrology, and other secret knowledge could certainly have fostered suspicion among the uneducated. The gory history is that any unnatural ability, anything that seemed to defy the common order of things, could potentially be twisted into an accusation of sorcery in the right or wrong circumstances. You can almost hear the whispered joke in a village tavern. Old Father Thomas can read the smallest print now. Perhaps he made a deal for a new pair of eyes. The shocking secret of eyeglasses is this duality of their reception. They are simultaneously a symbol of the highest learning and a potential mark of unnatural power. For the scholar in his study, they are a divine blessing, a tool of God that allows him to better study holy texts. But for the peasant in the field, they might be an object of fear and suspicion, a sign that the wearer possesses a power that is not entirely human. We arrive now at the close of the medieval period, and at an invention so monumental, so transformative, that it would not only reshape its own era, but set the stage for the entire modern world. The printing press with movable type, developed by Johannes Gutenberg around 1440. On the surface, this is the ultimate story of progress, an invention that promised to democratize knowledge, spread literacy, and bring the light of learning to the masses. But the shocking secret, as we've previously touched upon, is that this machine of enlightenment was also a machine of chaos, an invention that unleashed knowledge and heresy in equal measure, fueling some of the most bitter and bloody conflicts in European history. Imagine the world before Gutenberg. Every book is a precious, unique object, painstakingly copied by hand by scribes, usually monks in a monastery scriptorium. It can take months, even years, to produce a single copy of a long text like the Bible. Books are incredibly expensive, owned only by the church, royalty, the highest nobility, or universities. Knowledge is a carefully guarded monopoly, controlled by a tiny, literate elite. The medical hardship, metaphorically, is a kind of societal blindness, where the vast majority of people have no direct access to the written word. Then, the printing press appears. Suddenly, texts can be reproduced with astonishing speed and accuracy, and at a fraction of the cost. The first major work Gutenberg prints is, fittingly, the Bible. For the first time, it becomes possible for the scriptures to be owned and read by a wider audience, not just the clergy. This in itself is a revolution, a key factor in the coming Protestant Reformation. But this is a double-edged sword. The human endurance that was once required to simply access a single book is now replaced by the new challenge of navigating a flood of competing, often contradictory information. The authorities, particularly the Catholic Church and established monarchies, quickly realized the terrifying potential of this new invention. If the Bible can be printed and distributed, so can the heretical interpretations of it by reformers like Martin Luther. One quirky tidbit. Luther's 95 Theses, which kick-started the Reformation in 1517, became one of the first bestsellers of the printing press era. Its message spreading across Germany and Europe with a speed that would have been impossible just a few decades earlier. The printing press fueled religious wars. Printed pamphlets, woodcut illustrations, and theological treatises became weapons in a vast propaganda war, inflaming passions and deepening the schism within Christendom, leading to a century of gory history and brutal conflict. The scholarly debate on the impact of the printing press is immense. Was it the single most important invention of the last millennium? How did it change human consciousness itself by standardizing texts and fostering more linear, private forms of reading? It undoubtedly spurred scientific progress, literacy, and political change, but it also enabled the spread of misinformation, propaganda, and extremist ideologies with an efficiency never before seen. It was, in a dark modern analogy, the internet of its day, with all the accompanying potential for both enlightenment and chaos. The shocking secret of the printing press is that it was not just an invention for creating books. It was an invention for creating new worlds, new conflicts, new ways of thinking. It broke the church's monopoly on religious truth and the state's monopoly on information. It empowered individuals like you, our reader, but it also unleashed a torrent of dissent, heresy, and war that would tear Europe apart. It is the ultimate medieval invention with a dual legacy, a tool of immense progress and an engine of profound, often violent, disruption. Our journey through the workshop of the medieval dark genius is now at an end. You have witnessed the cold, mechanical cruelty of inventions of justice like the rack and the pear of anguish. You have seen the symphony of destruction composed by the trebuchet and the crossbow. You have recoiled from the healer's horror, the cures of bloodletting and trepanning that were often worse than the disease. And you have even seen the hidden perils lurking within the seemingly benign progress of daily life, from the fiery trap of the chimney to the world-altering chaos unleashed by the printing press. The shocking secret that binds all these disparate inventions together is a profound and perhaps unsettling truth about human ingenuity. Progress is not always born of noble aspirations. Often, it is driven by our darkest impulses and most desperate needs, by the desire to dominate in war, to enforce control through fear, to conquer disease even with flawed understanding, and to survive in a harsh and unforgiving world. The very same creativity that can build a soaring cathedral can also engineer a machine to tear a human body apart. This is the dual nature, the dark soul of invention. As you now allow these images of strange contraptions, of gears and levers, of fire and steel, to recede into the quiet of your own technologically advanced world, take a moment. Appreciate the simple certainties you enjoy. Your home is warmed without the constant fear of a creosote-fueled inferno. Your ailments are treated by a medicine based on science, not superstition. Your justice system, for all its flaws, does not rely on instruments of torture to extract confessions. The medical hardship and gory history of these medieval inventions are, for you, a distant story to help you sleep, not a lived reality. Let this understanding bring you a sense of peace. The struggles of that era, the constant battle for survival against both nature and the often brutal ingenuity of humankind, are long past. In the safety and comfort of your room, you are shielded from such perils. Allow the intellectual curiosity to be satisfied, and the disquieting images to fade. Let the intricate, often terrifying machinery of the past give way to the simple, gentle mechanics of your own breathing as you prepare for rest. May your dreams be free of any dark inventions, filled only with the peace and tranquility of a world that has, in many ways, learned from the brutal lessons of its own dark genius.